If there's anything you want to ask any of these guys, please put your hand up and away we go. We've got a question over here.
I shouldn't need a microphone.
That's okay.
Question just relating to special VFR. Seen recently where the weather's been okay, a little bit of cloud on the deck. Getting clearance out of here, there are times I've asked for a special VFR just to get close to cloud. Would you prefer I do that, or would you prefer me just to get 5 mile off track or stop climb at 500 feet just so I get past the weather? I'm just trying to work out what's easiest. I mean, I could care less either way, but...
It's a bit contextual, so every situation is different. The decision is always going to be yours. You're going to have to decide what's going to be safest for you.
Yep.
If you come and offer us to deviate or special VFR, if you give us the option to give you, that's a bit of an odd one, but I'd expect you just to decide what's going to be safest.
Well, I like special VFR because it keeps me on track, it keeps me on a constant climb. But after listening to what you said earlier about special VFR, just not quite sure.
So I'll just go on from there. Cameron touched on the visibility minima for special VFR. So special VFR, however, only applies inside Class C. So if you are at the special VFR minima and you enter Class G, you have breached that rule.
Oh, it's close to cloud coming out of here. Not the visibility is close to cloud.
So I get that. So hence the reason why Cameron is suggesting that special VFR to depart immediately places you behind the 8 ball because you are instantly leaving the control zone in a compromised situation.
Yeah, not necessarily. If the cloud base is at 1500,
yep.
Special VFR you can fly just below it in Class C. Outside class, in Class G, you are VFR.
Look,
anyway.
Yeah, that's obviously a case. What we find, however, when we get reports about people from the tower saying that, look, there's people going in and out special VFR and the weather's really bad, like the weather is close to non-VMC, we're talking about. You're not talking about really a non-VMC situation all over.
No.
You're just talking about going in a direction. That's a different matter. Often we get reports from the tower and from people walking up Nightcliff Beach, seeing aircraft coming up along at very low levels with a cloud base that is pretty low to the ground. And yes, inside the control zone, special VFR could be permissible. But in that circumstance, if you did depart and the weather was such that in the entire control zone you had to have a special VFR to stay under the cloud, if that weather existed outside the control zone, you would immediately have breached the VFR rule, which is not a good place to be, back to that 1600 metre visibility issue. So that's our take on what we get from reports and what we advise people to do. If you have to get out on a special VFR clearance with widespread bad weather, as soon as you're outside the zone, you're not VMC. Now, the special case you're talking about might be different.
Anyone else?
The criteria for expect instrument approach versus expect visual approach. Sometimes it just doesn't seem to make any sense.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, so a lot of the time it's going to be based off sector observations, so we may actually be at a stage where we've gone to expect instrument approach because of a certain portion of the airspace is no good, whether visibility or cloud. But we know for a fact, based on the sector observations, that you are probably going to get visual from the north or something. The way weather works in Darwin, the north might be completely clear and the south might be completely and utterly soup. So when it comes to that, generally we're going to go off a general observation. If it's more likely that aircraft are going to require an instrument approach, we'll just put expect instrument approach on the ATIS. That's not saying that the entire airspace is completely souped out and visual approaches are not available. It's just an expectation from us. So we'll make it a judgment, a general judgment, and that's all we really can do with the ATIS. The ATIS is just a very, very general piece of information. But yeah.
And what height would you base that on? Generally, the 3,000 feet, the MSA, or would you use the radar? Because some days you sort of you hear scattered at 2 and it's still visual approaches, and other days it'll be few at 3.5.
Yeah, like if you're coming in from the north, we can even vector you all the way down to 1.7 or 1.8, depending on where you are. We're vectoring off what we call our RTCC overlaid onto the screen. So we don't necessarily have to use the MSA. We're looking at the screen, we're using an RTCC. So generally speaking, if it's few at 2 or scattered at 2, it may be completely confined to a certain part of the airspace. And if we've got aircraft coming in from the north who we're pretty certain can still maintain visual, there's not going to be an issue with that. But in terms of the specific criteria, it's really, as I said before, it's going to be a general assessment of the airspace.
This is directed at Cameron. You mentioned before about weather radars and I guess learning how to use them properly. I've had a look myself online and in user guides and flight manuals and things to find some good information on weather radars. And I haven't really found anything too useful. Do you know anywhere where there's good resources or where to find information like that?
As with most things, the first place I would counsel you start is the manufacturer's guide. All right, it's going to be the first place I'd look, and that's probably going to give you direct instruction on how the functionality of the equipment works, so what all the buttons do and what the modes and the selections are. And to be honest with you, I think the best way to capture it is to read several different articles. You'll get little snippets of good stuff out of each. For example, if you Google search how to set the tilt on a radar, you'll get a story about altitude in thousands of feet, drop the thousands, tilt the radar down till you get ground return at that distance, tilt it up 7 to 8 degrees, good to go. You know, rough kind of settings. So you'll definitely get that sort of information. Setting the tilt is one of the common things that people tend to struggle with to get the most amount of value, and also interpreting the radar returns. So you'll find articles on that kind of
You
thing.
mentioned the PC-12's got struck by lightning. What kind of damage did they get from that?
Cha-ching.
So what happens when a PT6 engine or most turbines get struck by lightning? It normally comes in through the spinner. So the shaft that is going through the engine normally gets instantly magnetised. The way they check for that is they walk up with a handful of paper clips and they throw it at the engine case, and if they stick, it's magnetised. That means it's got to come out. So you can imagine getting struck by lightning in Woopul. The engine's got to come out right there, and if it's a PC-12, for instance, normally the loaner engine might be in Canada, so it's got to come out, or wherever it is, and get stuck in the aeroplane. There will be an exit hole somewhere, and in PC-12s they've got some carbon fibre. It normally goes down a wingtip or a tail. When I joined the Air Wing in '99, one of our aircraft had been struck by lightning sometime before. It just got back in the air, but for 2 years after that, just about every electrical component, one after the other, fell over until we replaced just about everything. So the effects of lightning strikes in certain aircraft, particularly modern ones, are long lasting for an owner or an operator. But basically the first thing is the engine will normally get a hit. I don't know what happened in Trevor's instance, but that's the story. But again, that class of aircraft is probably not specifically designed to be struck by lightning. Airliners probably have better defences.
Okay, so that was out at Manningrida area, I think, and the aircraft was actually on the ground there for quite a while. And I wasn't aware of the shipping, but they would have done the repair out there, put the spare motor engine in and flown it out. Second time it was actually probably, I think actually just before Cyclone Carlos actually. And looking back now, one of our pilots flying back through, very clear of the weather, coming back through Jabiru area, going to Kera, Gator as we do, that star coming in, and it was struck by lightning then. The pilot only saw a big flash, didn't feel it hit the aircraft, but once he landed, knew there was a big chip out the propeller and exit out of the tail. So once again, loaner engine, and another 3 or 4 weeks before a new one comes back in again after it's been done up. And then you've got to change it back over again, so it's a big expense. It's about, it all depends on it because of insurance and stuff. Time stuff's expired on the aircraft, on the engine, they only give you pro rata. So sometimes it's pro rata about 300,000 to 500,000. And if you replace the propeller blades, probably 25,000 to 30,000 as well, if you find them these days. And the third time it was flying out of Alice Springs. It was flying from Tennant Creek back to Alice, and that was a thunderstorm that they had a fair, I suppose they were around about 50 miles away from that thunderstorm itself, and the lightning had come out horizontal and struck the aircraft. So it was a fair way away. There wasn't any diversions at the time. I followed an aircraft in. Cameron would be aware of this one of the Beech 1900s of Vincent's, was going Jabiru. There was one fairly small queue about 15 miles to south of Jabiru. I was following in, it's probably about 10 minutes behind. And they landed, I landed behind them, and they were over having out a look at the right-hand engine, all sad-faced and everything. I said, what's wrong, guys? They said, we got struck by lightning. I go, lightning? That cloud that was just down the south, I'd hardly picked it up on the weather radar. It was showing a little green on the weather radar. Isolated, we were in clear sky. And it had shot out 10 miles, or 15 miles, horizontal lightning, hit the propeller and exited the aircraft wing. And we were in blue sky.
Just out of interest, who here has had a lightning strike before? Not me?
I've seen plenty.
Yeah.
Seen plenty on airlines.
I've been in a Dash 8 that got hit by lightning, but that's about it. We also have Bob from Darwin International Airport. If you have any airport-related questions, please feel free.
I've got a lightning story.
Oh, okay. Fire away, Bob.
Thanks. Gerard asked earlier about that storm warning system that we have on airport, and it's there for good reason for the ground handlers, but during a thunderstorm one afternoon, ATC had asked Safety 1 for a water depth assessment on the runway. And they'd gone out and done that. It was one of our seasoned safety officers. And many of you will know Mike Clancy, our airside ops manager. His second day on the job. And we got a call from ground. We think Safety 1's been struck by lightning on taxiway Bravo 2. And so we were expecting the worst. I was a member of the rescue party. We went out to the vehicle. They were fine. They were dazed. The lightning had struck a taxiway light about 2 metres away from the vehicle, and it wasn't going anywhere. We had to tow it back. And it was a brand new diesel Land Cruiser. And so much energy went into the ground and around that vehicle, it fried everything under the dashboard, and the panel was $20,000 to repair. So that's an indication of lightning power on the ground. Anything else for the airport while I'm here?
To Rich, with Darwin being very lots of controlled airspace, restricted airspace around, you spoke about the request and require comment. If there's active restricted airspace and pilots require that or require to fly through that, does the term require allow pilots to fly into that airspace? And also, how do restricted airspaces get controlled from ATC?
This is a really good one for us. It's actually so important to ATC. It's part of our core theory, what to do if an aircraft is forced to fly into restricted airspace. If you find yourself in a situation where you really only have two choices, to fly into the weather or to fly into restricted airspace, the diplomatic answer I'll give you is don't fly into the weather. At that stage, when you fly into that restricted airspace, when you're given no choice, we have a certain list of actions that we have to take. The first action is to cancel your control services. So we're making it very clear to you that you're not flying on an airways clearance when you enter that restricted airspace. The reason for that is because we may not own it. And we may not own it, and we may not know what's going on in it. So we certainly can't have you operating under an airways clearance from us when we don't actually know what's inside the airspace. And from there, we have a checklist of actions. One of them will be to continue to provide you a flight information service. So we're not going to just stop talking to you, but we're going to be telling you that you're now proceeding at your own risk. We don't know what's in the airspace. It's not ours, or it may not be ours. You're proceeding at your own risk. I would suggest that the safety of, or the risk of flying through restricted airspace versus the risk of flying through an active cell is you can probably work out what is less hazardous immediately. But and from there, we continue an alerting service. So we'll actually go to an alert phase. We'll instruct you to squawk 7700 and go from there. So it's actually stipulated pretty clearly what we're to do. A big part of it is you're not under our clearance anymore, we have to stack that to you. It's very important that we can't tell you necessarily everything that's going on there because it may not be ours.
Hey guys, look, thank you so much. I'd like you all to please give a round of applause to all of our SMEs.